Can you imagine walking into a hotel and all of a sudden the elevator doors open and there walks Billy Graham? I had that opportunity many years ago and we chatted, we had a conversation, and he told me something that I will never forget. Stay with me, let me tell you. When I was looking into the eyes of Billy Graham in that lobby, I asked him if there was one thing he would want to tell me that I could pass on to others. And you know what he said? He pointed to his Bible and he said, "Stay in the book. Stay in the book." I never forgot those words. Let me expand upon that a little bit, because recently, as you know, in the Nashville area, we've had some very turbulent times over lots of things. And one of the things we had to deal with was there was the LGBTQ community, and they wanted to have a permit to have another Pride Festival picnic in the public park. And we felt, as conservatives and as citizens, that they should not receive it this coming year because they lied to us and they deceived us. They said that there was going to be nothing that would be objectionable. They said all ages welcome, families, etc. But then they had a drag performer and it was disgraceful. It was just lewd. And this man, I can't even begin to describe what went on. So we said that as a result of this, a consequence should be no permit this coming year. And then we'll take another look at it. Well, I received a letter and others did, and people attacked me. And it was one of these kind of things where you begin to say, is it really worth it? Well, I believe it is, because we have a responsibility. And a letter was sent to the mayor and to the aldermen or the city councilman. And in that letter, there were comments that were made. This man wrote, and he said he was a conservative Christian, but he wasn't even at the meetings. We had these lengthy 5-6 hour meetings that went on 2 occasions to deal with this issue. And he was calling us Christian nationalists. He said what was taking place was akin to dictatorship, trying to take control. He said, the kingdom of God is here in our area, and it includes all the LGBTQ people. It was just a misrepresentation, and it was very tragic what he said. So when you get these kind of letters, people said, Larry's a liar, he's a sociopath, and all these kind of crazy things. You think, is it really worth it? And people will say things like, look, I'm a pastor. I just want to go on with business as usual. We want to have a middle of the road. We don't want to get involved in this kind of stuff. Billy Graham wouldn't do it. He just preached the gospel. He had a pure message. Well, is that really accurate? Billy Graham, you can go back and watch his sermons. And I do it. And you know what he said? He said, you preach with a Bible in one hand and a newspaper in the next. And Billy took a stand on issues. He stood against communism. He spoke against segregation. Before he died, he signed the letter that stood against, with his son Franklin, gay, quote, marriage. Billy didn't back up. But you've got to remember, Billy also was an evangelist. He was not a pastor. Pastors are charged. 2 Timothy 4, you can read it there, where the word is given. I charge you in the presence of God, who's going to bring judgment, that basically we have a responsibility to what? Preach the word, and to rebuke, reprove, and do it with all patience and teaching, because a time is going to come when men are going to want to tickle their ears. They're not going to want to hold to the truth. Well, Billy Graham, he for almost 70 years counseled in private presidents. In fact, Obama, literally before Billy died, went to Montreat and he spent time with him there. Billy didn't shrink back. But what we've got to realize is that we're living in a time that is different than when Billy lived. You say, what do you mean? Well, how about some of these things? Because we must change with the times. We must. And it's not the same as it was even in the 70s or 80s today. Let me give you some things Billy didn't face. And we have to ask, are we going to deal with these? Number one is what? Abortion on demand and the push for federal funding of that, and abortion right up until the moment of birth. How about homosexual, quote, marriage and the pushing of it as the law of the land? Billy didn't have to face the LGBTQ agenda being celebrated and promoted in our country all over the place, in pride parades and everything, not just a day or a week, but for a month. How about the transgender ideology and the whole approach of surgical, supposing, transgender care, as it's called, mutilation of young people's bodies, chemical castration and hormone therapy and all of these kind of things, and pushing it that, hey, parents shouldn't even have a say in this. How about drug legalization? And I'm talking narcotics, heavy, in cities now across this country. How about open borders and the invasion of our country by illegal immigrants and what that is doing? 1,500 a day in El Paso. I've been in El Paso over 20 times. What's happening to our security and our nation? What about if you look and you say, well, what about the drag performances that are taking place in schools and for children in libraries? What about euthanasia, death with dignity being pushed in our day? Global warming, climate control, and massive spending for the Green New Deal and what hysteria that is working on. How about election fraud and the pushing of various things that are really fraudulent practices? It's never happened in our history. What about, if you look about infanticide, allowing a baby in a botched abortion to die, and others? How about if you look about government approval? If, this is a scary one, abortion pills, distribute them, pharmacies, free, and allowing that to take place in a convenient way. It's happening right before our eyes in this day. How about school shootings? Since Columbine, there have been 380 school shootings. Billy wasn't facing this. Critical race theory, heretical teaching about our founding in our country. How about if you look at rampant pornography, a click away on a computer or on an iPhone? Sex trafficking, it is rampant. Right now, drugs, number one problem with youth, and then sex trafficking, and then what else? Well, you'd say illegal gun sales. How about this one? We don't even want to talk about this, but what do you do with men that are saying they want to compete as women and they declare themselves to be women? How about men that are saying, well, yeah, it's okay, let us come in your restrooms, your bathrooms, there's nothing you can say against this? What about child predators? Boy Scouts of America, clergy, the tragedy and how this has happened right on our watch. How about the woke gender ideology and the insanity that is taking place in this country today? What about this one? How about the whole approach of an administration that is radicalized and socialist in nature and pushing agendas to topple and dismantle this country and change it into a socialist nation? And then lastly, maybe how about this? Corrupt media, corrupt Department of Justice. We have a man in the White House today, let's face it, he's cognitively deficient. He's more like serving in a monarchy. That's what it is. He's like a ceremonial person. He doesn't really like to do press conferences. He has handlers that are with him. And all of this is taking place. And this is the most powerful man on the planet. Folks, we could go on. This is the gravity of the situation, and we're living in it today, so we have to change with the circumstances. Now, I want to close by just referring once again, there's a phenomenal prophetic book out. It's called Letter to the American Church. And it compares what took place in 1930s with Nazi Germany. And Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a man of God, a theologian, was issuing warnings. They canceled him. They cut him off. They didn't want his message to go forth. But he continued courageously to persevere. Well, in the book, Letter to the American Church, there's a statement. I want to read it to you. Read this with me. This is what Mr. Bonhoeffer was facing in his day. It says this, that this was a tremendous frustration for Dietrich Bonhoeffer because he knew that unless the German church leaders clearly saw the urgency of what was happening and acted with even greater urgency, all would be lost. As long as they dithered and debated, the Nazis would regain the upper hand and they would win. Did these pastors not understand that things had changed dramatically and that they must respond dramatically? That's the word that must come today. And I want to tell you, you say, how are we to respond? Well, pastors, as leaders, the people are going to follow. And I want you to know it's a critical time. We are at a turning point of history. We are literally in a time where our future is on the line. Will we succumb or will we survive? We have to, number one, take a stand. And as leaders, we lead the way. Number two, it's not just we take a stand, but we need to halt the loss of our liberties. And number three, I would say this, we have to believe God and work towards a turnaround for the trajectory that we're on right now. And then lastly, we need to humble ourselves, cry out for greater hunger, that there be a true revival and a second great awakening in our day. One of my heroes is a man that lived in the 1700s, Edmund Burke. He's called the grandfather of conservatism. He was a man that served in the parliament for almost 30 years. But he made a statement, and these words are for us today. No more silence, passivity, complacency. We take a stand. We move in a winsome and a loving way. We proclaim the word. But he said this, Edmund Burke said this. He said, all that's required for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. Those words haunt us, but they're for us today. Times have changed. It's time we change and move with those times to see a new day for the United States of America and a restoration of what God ordained right from the beginning when the Pilgrims came.
Hey friends, if you felt this video was helpful, make sure you like and subscribe so you get notified once new videos become available. Thanks.